So if so much debt is just imaginary numbers, why can't we just cancel it? Just wipe away all the global debt? G'day there guys, happy 2017. I've gotten some really interesting discussions on my China banking video, and one of them was a really interesting question asked by Adrian Tyler. Why can't a large part of global debt be written off? With fiat money, the system, the base currency is created out of thin air. So why don't central banks simply cancel all this debt, which after all is just numbers on a computer system? So the short answer here is that this isn't really going to work, because fiat money and government debt, those are two independent levers of economic control. It's kind of like driving a car. You have the steering wheel and you have the accelerator, and how you use those two independently of each other and in connection with each other is how you control the car. But you can't necessarily turn a corner faster by just standing on the accelerator more. It's not going to work that way. So let's untangle fiat money and government debt. Issuing new debt, that's what the government and the Treasury does. Printing money and managing the money supply, that's what the central bank does. And note here that when I say print, I don't literally mean printing new banknotes and coins, M0. No, I mean M3, the broad money supply. The definitions of these terms is found in the description below. So yeah, I am talking about journal entries in accounting software somewhere. I'm not talking about physical money. But that doesn't not make the money real. So this is money in the same way that this is money. Having a physical token doesn't necessarily make it real. The important thing is that these decisions are independent. The decision to issue more debt is made separate of the decisions to manage the money supply. And the central bank does this by either printing more cash or shredding cash. What? Shred cash? Does the government ever shred money? Why yes, actually the government does shred money, but more frequently it prints more than it actually shreds. You see, this is most of the time because the economy is growing. Suppose that the economy is growing at a normal clip of say 3%. All things being equal, this means you're going to need another 3% of dollar bills out there. But in fact, usually central banks print a little bit more than the rate of economic growth, in this case 3%. And this is usually because most economists agree that a little bit of inflation is usually a pretty good thing. And deflation's a very, very bad thing. Go and ask the Japanese. So a little bit of inflation, that's okay, but you have to be careful not to overdo it. Go and ask someone from Zimbabwe. So what's important here is that fiat money represents a very powerful lever by which a central bank can control the general economic speed. Not very precise, but very powerful indeed. Now there's a lot of misunderstanding on the internet about central banking and the role that it plays. Note that central banks aren't like any other investor. Having more money does not necessarily mean it's a good thing. I mean, central banks don't even care about having more money. They can simply just turn on the printers and make more of the stuff if they want to. Money in this sense isn't real to the Reserve Bank of Australia in the way that a $100 bill has value to you and I. Unlike normal banks or investors, central banks are not judged by how much money they make. Instead, their sole criteria of performance is how well they manage the entire economy. So importantly, central banks are actually owned by the government, but they're not actually controlled by the government. Well, at least most central banks are independent in most developed countries. Yes, I recognise that the US Federal Reserve is a special case for historical reasons, but it's definitely a public institution and not at all a private bank, as many conspiracy theories out there claim. But in Australia, the Reserve Bank is wholly owned by the federal government. It even pays a dividend back to the Treasury occasionally. Link in the description below. So in Australia we have a Liberal government with Malcolm Turnbull as our current Prime Minister. But even as the most powerful person in the entire land, he has zero power to legally force the central government to print more money. So this begs the question, why would you bother separating monetary power from government fiscal power? See, politicians need to try and keep the people happy. And the best way to do this is to make promises, either to increase spending or cut taxes, or my personal favourite, both at the same time. So there's always this political pressure to run cash deficits. And if you're running out of money, that essentially means two things. Either you can choose to borrow the cash or you can choose to print more. But what people commonly forget is that both borrowings and printing cash are in fact taxes. They're just really sneaky, stealthy taxes. So borrowings are simply tax on future citizenry in order to pay for projects now. And printing cash is essentially a tax on anybody who's holding cash or assets denominated in dollars. Anyone who's holding cash assets will find their value slowly eroded and eaten away over time through inflation. Where did all of this value go, I wonder? Government. I wonder. So because politicians have this constant temptation to simply print their way to bigger and better promises, the decision was made to remove that temptation from them and give it to an independent authority, namely the central bank. So this is why in most rich nations there is a rock-solid guarantee that the central bank be completely independent from the power of the government. So a central banker's role is to try and manage the general economic performance. It's not there to try and make the government of the day look good. And it's quite normal for these two to disagree about how to best fix the economy. So a central banker might look at an inflationary, spend up big promises type government and decide to actually keep the money supply constant. They might do this by withdrawing cash out of the economy at the same rate that they're busy loaning that cash back to the government in order to fund their spending up big promises. Oh, g'day there, Donald. We're just learning about some economics. So if you want to learn more about central banking, can I recommend this series here by Extra History on the development of the gold standard? It's fantastic. Also, I'd like to recommend this video by John Green from Crash Course, which talks about the role of money and potentially slavery. Both of them are great, and the link, of course, is in the description below. So why can't we just write off the debt and fudge the money supply? Well, it's because these two are separate things. And there's so much more I wanted to cover in this video, such as when you issue government debt, who owns it? Is it the citizenry? Is it foreigners? Is it foreign governments? What implications does this have? Quite a lot. What about quantitative easing or this really interesting history of the US Federal Reserve? There's so much more here to talk about. So what do you think, guys? Do you have another explanation as to why we just can't write off the debt because we have fiat money? Why don't you let me know in the comments below? And of course, if you've got any questions, you can either ask them in the comments or you can post them directly on my Facebook wall. Again, link is in the description. My name's Phillip and I want to wish you all the very best for this coming year. Happy 2017, guys.